Welcome back to Families in Action right here on KHTS, AM 1220, your hometown station. And hey, Cary, before we jump back into the show, everybody just heard our theme song,
yes.
right?
Well, they've been hearing it for a lot of years, Mike.
A lot of years. And, you know, people come in here, the guests are always saying, they're singing along with it, and they're trying to remember the name and all that. Let me give you the scoop on this, because people are going to say, oh, I remember now. Okay, it was a group called the Youngbloods.
That I knew.
Right. The song was called Get Together.
Right.
And it was released in 1967. It peaked at number 62 on the Hot 100, but it did better on Adult Contemporary at 37. The lead singer, Jesse Colin Young, I don't know if that had anything to do with Young.
Probably some.
He also played bass on the song.
Very cool.
And it's a very, you can sing along with it very easily.
Yeah.
Very catchy.
Very catchy. Anyway, back to the show today. We're doing a follow-up on the Immature Teen Brain on Pot, which happened last week. Very successful, and Dr. Darren Privet from Henry Mayo's ED is with us, and he and you both got a lot of questions during the show.
We did. You know, Dr. Privet, we were just talking on break, and you said there was on the article there was a lot of people.
Feedback, right.
What was some of the feedback? I didn't read it.
Well, a lot of it was, definitely trying to establish what we said in the symposium, but there, of course, there's always going to be a couple naysayers, and there was one in particular that said, he was glad that Dr. Privet was there to give the science information, and he would like to challenge me to prove that there was one case where someone might have overdosed on marijuana. And I think that's a lot of, when you talk about people who try to justify the use of drugs, specifically marijuana, that's one of the main arguments that they use, that it's a safe drug.
Right.
That you can never overdose on it because it's a type of drug that doesn't really cause respiratory suppression, but nonetheless, it certainly impairs your ability to make proper decisions. It increases your risk for risky behavior. You typically, for instance, last night I had a patient who came in who was in a severe trauma, and there was alcohol on board and marijuana. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily just use marijuana. It leads them to riskier behavior, which can increase their risk of potential trauma and injury, which to me is just as the same as overdosing on the medication.
You're right. You might
drug.
You might not overdose and lose your life right then.
Sure.
But there's all kinds of other things that you got to take in. Think about this for a second. Number one, your judgment.
Yeah.
Number two, we're finding more and more people that are really becoming psychotic.
Right.
They're having psychotic breaks. When you call that an overdose?
No. But if it leads you to increase in depression and potential suicide, yes, that's the same thing to me.
Exactly, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, I besides running the Henry Mayo's Behavioral Health Unit, I also own rehabs. We're getting more and more phone calls today from people wanting to be admitted for marijuana dependency.
Yeah.
Marijuana dependency. We're getting more and more parents calling us with younger and younger children trying to admit their kids for marijuana dependency.
And Cary,
in fact, Michael, more people are treated in this country for marijuana dependency than all other drugs.
Oh, wow.
I mean, outpatient counselings and that kind of stuff. There are more people treated for that.
And you mention this frequently, but we can't say it often enough.
Right.
Somebody could say, I'm just going to smoke marijuana. That's it. But you've said this over and over again. After a while, marijuana isn't going to get you there. You're going to want to get something else.
Okay. Not everybody that lights up a joint is going to become a drug addict. We know that.
Right.
But some will. And number one, it's not worth the risk. And number two, everybody says that. I'm only going to smoke pot.
Well, we talked about that in the symposium, that the area of the drug that stimulates that part of the brain hypersecretes dopamine, which is the main part, neurotransmitter of the reward system. And once you find things that you find joy in and reward you with, you no longer find joy in that. And so it increases your risk-taking to take stronger drugs, to have stronger joy and being rewarded more, and you kind of get impaired to that.
And it's an instant gratification kind of deal, which we're all looking for.
Yeah.
As soon as you start getting high, you feel good. If somebody tells you drugs make you feel bad, they're really lying. Drugs make you feel good. In fact, drugs make you feel great. That's the problem with drugs. It's not that they make you feel bad.
Yeah.
And again, what are the things were people asking you there?
Well, there's a lot of questions regarding, medical marijuana, and I think people are in the community, or you hear about this, and I think it's a large push to legalization, and
I believe it'll be legal.
yeah, it probably will be for sure, and maybe that'll help them control it,
You think?
regulate it. Probably not. But that being said, this is a hot topic of medical marijuana, and that's one of the biggest problems that we see. A lot of these kids, unfortunately, have medical marijuana cards and are using it to get high, not for
Right.
therapeutic or medical purposes. But one of the things that we've seen is there's a specific chemical in marijuana called CBD, and they're actually finding that has some therapeutic benefit because the THC, I learned something new too. There's 420 chemicals in marijuana.
Right.
And obviously the main chemical that gets you high is that THC, but there is a chemical, the CBD, and that's kind of where people are focused on in the science field of how you can use that medical purpose-wise, and it's found that you don't get high off that, but it does actually stimulate different parts of the receptors in the brain and the body that can be used for seizures and chronic pain, where there might be some therapeutic benefit to it.
But it's not the part of the drug that gets you high.
It's not. So, in a sense, it's a good thing because then recreational users are not going to use that to get high, and
Right,
people
right,
who
right.
really need it are going to benefit from using that type of.
And if you really consider it medicine, somebody asked a great question, and I've been saying this forever. Why isn't it in pharmacies?
Yeah.
Number one, why isn't it regulated like
Sure.
that?
Yep.
You
And
know?
you also mentioned something very interesting at the gathering, at the presentation, and that is that you have people coming in and saying to you in the ED, well, I'm using marijuana because my back hurts and because of this and because of that, and you point out, and rightly so, well, you've never had it x-rayed, you've never had any other kind of treatment, you just went straight to marijuana with this.
Right. And that's my argument, that I suspect that there probably is some indications to use it medically speaking, but that's after you've exhausted other options and try to do different treatments and medicines and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's the frustrating part. And that's just behavior to justify and an excuse to use it.
Very good point.
So.
And we're going to be back with more with Dr. Darren Privet right after these messages. You're listening to KHTS AM 1220, and this is Families in Action with your host, Cary Quashen, and our special guest, Dr. Darren Privet from Henry Mayo's. I almost said behavioral health.
I
unit.
know,
I'm
I
so
was
used to that.
listening to that.
Sometimes it feels like that,
From
when
the
I'm in emergency room.
emergency.
Well, I bet you the ER is
department.
kind of like a psych unit,
It
isn't
is.
it?
One day I'm a psychiatrist, one day I'm a pain specialist, one day an orthopedic. Some days I'm a real ER doctor. So, it just depends. The way that the tide is changing, the emergency room is a primary care resource for a lot of the community.
It's the hub.
Unfortunately, it is, and so, but that's okay. We're the safety net for the community, and we're there, and that's what's cool about being able to utilize that and to go out in the community and be involved in these symposiums, and
Oh, yeah.
and a grateful part of my job to be able to do that.
Well,
I'll
I
tell
tell you
you-
what, I was going to say the right thing, but what Cary was telling us while we were in the break threw me off. Cary's the only person I ever met that had a tomato shake.
Yeah. I won't get into it, but yeah, I don't eat tomatoes because somebody made a strawberry shake, ran out of strawberries, and
That's
it
a
was
bad joke.
filled
That's
with
bad
tomatoes.
news.
So that
That's
that
bad
kind
news.
of blew it for me.
You just know you were vegetarian way back then.
I'm telling you, something happened. Yeah, that's right.
Cary,
So,
what kind of questions did you get asked?
I think I didn't get a lot of questions afterwards. I had a whole lot of people that were grateful. More than when we did the heroin kills and the pills kill. Now, obviously, there was people in major crisis with the heroin kills. People raised their hand. We put people in rehabs from 2 different symposiums straight in. They came there and asked for help, which makes sense. But I think this one really kind of woke the community up. First of all, look how many people showed.
Yeah.
I mean, and not only parents, but we had more kids even than parents that showed up
And
with
it
their
was
parents.
full early. I mean, it filled up early.
Right. I walked in. We got there 45 minutes early. The speakers and I walked in the back room where they were doing all the stuff.
The resources.
Right, the resource stuff. And then I walked in the back room and it was packed already.
Yeah.
So people really wanted to know what was going on with marijuana. People are really interested. Parents really wanted to know, and so did the young kids.
Yeah.
They did.
So to me, it was a major success, and so many people said they loved what you did
Yeah.
because you gave real scientific information. How do you argue with that?
Right.
You can't. And I'm pretty blunt. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I think shout out to the city. They've really taken this by the reins, and and focused on the symposium, trying to make this community better.
Yes.
You know, in all aspects. And I think it's been great that we've been able to do this now for the past 5 years or so.
Look what we have here.
Yeah.
The city is, I mean, people say, oh, there's a lot of drugs in Santa Clarita. Wait a minute. There's a lot of drugs everywhere.
Everywhere, right.
There's no more drugs here. We talk more about it here.
We're very proactive, yeah.
With the captain of the sheriff's
Yeah,
station. What
absolutely.
a great guy. And the J team and the school district everybody here took a stand and we said, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We're
Yeah.
going to do everything we can to combat this deal.
Yeah.
And there were community leaders in the presentation as well, sitting there. Mary Chester from the.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
A lot, it was packed.
And I think the key is that, hopefully we just conveyed is that there's absolutely no reason why a teenager should be using marijuana. Absolutely none. Not even really for any type of medical purposes unless there is no other option. And some other potential uses of it, specific with the CBD, we've seen pediatric patients who have retractable recurrent seizures that might be beneficial. Or I would suspect if a pediatric patient who has cancer and needs that for that point. But there's really no reason or justification why any teenager should be on marijuana, and more importantly because what it does to the brain. And you can look all you want on social media, you can look all you want on the internet, and there are plenty of studies that say that it does not affect cognition, it does not affect your brain. Science has proven it. It definitely does when the brain is developing. Now, an adult is totally different. Your brain's developed. You're not going to have the impairment that you typically would. And
Right.
and then, I learned a lot from you, Cary, saying you'd rather treat someone who's on heroin or cocaine than you would a teenager on marijuana.
They're so addicted to it.
Yeah.
Especially the younger, even the worse.
Right.
We get them 12 or 13 years old. I mean, that's all they think about is getting high. They're sneaking out of their house. They're not going to school. They're fighting with their parents. And I've literally sent kids to Utah for a year because they're not going to make it in 30 days.
Right.
When they're 15, 16, 14 even, we have a better shot at reaching them.
Sure.
Because their brains, at least they can kind of figure out, hey, I'm messing up here. I better pay attention to it. But 12 years old, no.
Yeah, and I think you conveyed that too. That starts at home with the parents.
Right.
And if the parents are doing it, then the kids are going to do it. And so it's so important that the parents set the example, set the tone.
Be role models.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you're adult enough to be a parent and have children, you better be adult enough to have these conversations. You better be adult enough to be a role model. Be their heroes, man. Be what you want for your kids. Walk like you talk.
Yep.
Do what I say, not what I do. Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
No.
So yeah, and it's terrible. I was talking about this earlier. We as a society, we spend 2 minutes with our kids every day. How's your day? Good. How's school? Okay. You hungry? I ate. You got homework? I done it. And we go do our thing. So these kids are left to their own devices with a brain that's not developed yet.
Now, Cary, I've heard you say that about the time factor a lot of times. So when you did that at the presentation, I didn't watch you. I was watching the audience.
Oh, yeah, so was I.
I have to tell you, there were a lot of teens there shaking their head
And parents.
yes to that one. I think the harpoon hit the heart.
In
for
fact,
a lot
I
of
can even
parents
hear
there.
I can even hear people go, There
yeah.
was it. But that's really true. So for parents, it gets harder and harder to talk to your kids as they get older. But if you refuse to lose that connection when they're younger, it's not that hard later. So one of those kind of things. When should we stop talking to our kids? Never. When should we stop telling our kids I love them in public? Never.
Yeah, it definitely starts with them.
It
Absolutely.
does. It starts at home, and you got to make a conscious decision that you're going to be present in your child's life, period, no matter what.
I loved your story about what you did with your child who said, "Don't tell me you love me in front of my friends."
Oh, yeah.
It's a great story.
It is. You want to tell it? You can.
No, I was going to let you tell it.
Nah. No, I'm just
I would say
teasing.
I haven't heard it. It
No,
sounds good though.
I think, do we need to take a break? So why don't we take a break, and I'll start with that when we come back. This is Families in Action on our hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.